Hi everyone, good afternoon. I hope you're all keeping really well. Welcome to this CRP conversation session. Today we're going to be hearing from Imperial College London, Innovate UK, KTN and Great British Railways Transition Team, all on air quality and innovation. I'll just put the agenda up while everyone's coming in. So to deliver this, we've got presentations from Dr. Gary Fuller, Imperial College London. Gary will be focusing on how government, policymakers and innovators need to work together for decarbonisation, air quality and climate policies to take effective action on the situation with lots of amazing case studies. Eleanor Marshall, Transport Infrastructure Lead, will be presenting on Innovate UK's UK KTN's role in decarbonising transport infrastructure across the UK alongside government. Eleanor will be providing examples of projects which have used the government-backed transport infrastructure funding and how this relates to policy. And we also have Daniel Fredrickson, who will be launching CRP's latest report, On Track for Sustainable Logistics, integrating rail freight into London's deliveries. So this is part of our Clean Air Freight project, funded by Impact on Urban Health, and this study's been undertaken with transport consultant Steer, and the report shows the potential for delivering more freight into London via rail and reducing pollution from road traffic. So yeah, really looking forward to hearing from Dan about the possibility of using Waterloo Station as a suitable site for rail freight. Deliveries would move into London via zero emission modes, and we'll be sending links to publications for that, which we've launched, and then we'll open up the floor to questions from the audience, which a few of you have submitted so far already via Eventbrite. And Catherine, Project Officer at CRP, is moderating the chat with links along the way to show you to these resources. And just quickly before the main presentations, we're really excited to launch CRP's annual report and business plan. So this shows our achievements from the past year and our exciting plans ahead to make London a better place to live, work and visit. And Catherine will be posting a link to that too. CRP's mission is to collaboratively deliver solutions that make London fairer, greener and safer. And the report states our impacts from the previous year. You can see on the left, these impacts are from Clean Air Villages 4, for example, all of which was delivered between April 2021 and June 2022. And other impacts within the document include 250 vehicle street events, which took place across 16 boroughs as part of Healthy Streets Every Day. We had our recently launched our London Light Freight River trial, which has just completed 4 weeks of deliveries from Dartford to Bankside as part of the DEFRA-funded Clean Air Logistics for London programme. And there's some nice video testimonials and a video of the project there. Yeah, lots of information. On the right are some of our goals for the next financial year, including the new DEFRA-funded Smarter Greener Logistics programme, plus Clean Air Freight, plus more outcomes from Clean Air Logistics for London, and we're working with both South Bank Bid and Eastern City Bid on programmes too. So please do take a look and follow social media for our different report launches this week. We also, have testimonials from partners, and it provides a welcome to our new partner, Harley Street Bid, as well as a comm summary. So a huge thank you to everyone for your continued support. Okay, I'm going to pass over to Gary, who's going to introduce the session and present on air quality and decarbonisation. So over to you, Gary.
Thank you, Rachel, and a huge thank you to the whole Cross River Partnership for asking me along. When we were formerly at King's, we did a few projects with you in the past, so it's great to be back here again. I wanted to have a little bit of a sort of just think about what a smog-free city may actually look like, and think about some of the ideas that could go into this and some of the motivations for doing it. First up, I think it's worth reminding ourselves of the health impact of air pollution in the UK, and there's been various estimates of this on annual mortality. A latest estimate came out at the end of 2022 by UKHSA. I think I've got an extra letter in that, which was between 29 and 43,000 attributable deaths. So those attributable to air pollution per year. And there's been quite a few counter narratives coming out about this and whether this health burden is actually realised or not. I think it's worth spending a moment thinking how these estimates are actually made. I did a search on sort of an online literature tool that's used a lot by academics just the other day on studies that have been done on air pollution and health, and there's been nearly 60,000 of them that have been published since 1932, and interestingly, half of those have been published in the last 10 years. So this is a really well developed field, which the evidence base in many areas is very strong indeed. And these figures where we have these numbers here come from many studies that look at populations in different cities that experience different levels of air pollution. And what these studies find is if you look at the air pollution people experience and really the length of life that they live, it becomes shortened by the air pollution that they're exposed to. If you then think that we have a cohort of people in a polluted place versus a cohort of people in a non-polluted place, if those in the more polluted place are dying sooner, then the death rate per year will be increased. And that's the basis for many of these figures. Those constants and those relationships from these many studies are then plugged into something that models London today, and we can come up with those figures. Now, in some ways, you could say they're only estimates. They're estimates for London, which you'll have seen in this report by my colleagues from Imperial, of around 3,600 to 4,100 deaths per year. And I think it's also worth remembering that though these are estimates, this is a real impact that it's having on people's health. And of course, you'll all be aware of the case of Ella Kisadeba, who lived close to the South Circular. And after a long legal battle, since air pollution has not previously been something that could be listed on birth certificates, death certificates, Ella's inquiry, was reopened by the coroner, and she became the first person in the UK to have air pollution listed as a cause of death. So what might a smog-free city look like? What things do we need to tackle? And we often think about these in terms of their elements, but there's clearly a discussion here about getting transport right and how we should move on from perhaps this narrative of is it diesel or petrol versus electric to actually getting the transportation right and bringing in active travel. I'll talk about that. It's also about our streetscapes. How should we be using our precious street space? Should we be using it for roads? Should we be using it for active travel corridors? Or should we be using it for social space and turning these things into parks? A lot of the work across River focuses on transport and urban realm, but we also really need to think about the ways in which we heat our homes, which I won't really touch on so much in this, but you can pick me up in questions. I'm sure this is mostly known to many of you, but the majority of the journeys that we take in the UK are very small, 23% of these are less than 2 miles. When I show this slide to a lot of people, everybody said, oh, that's London. Where I am is absolutely different. This is a mean for England and Wales. This isn't just London. This is a much more widespread behaviour. And of course, these short journeys are things that could be easily taken over for active travel and probably are actually faster to walk and cycle. So what would actually be realised if we had more people walking and cycling? There's a really nice study done from UK Biobank. So this is about 500,000 people. If we're in a real room, I'd like everyone to put their hands up if they were actually a UK Biobank participant, because there's about 500,000 out there. But they're people who are registered and their health is being followed and tracked. 5 years into UK Biobank, it was possible to see amongst those people that worked, which is about half the people, so 2,600, that the cycle commuters were living shorter lives, and those people that walked to work had less heart disease compared to car commuters, and that was seen just over a 5-year window. There's a lot of concerns about whether there are disbenefits associated with increased active travel, and you'll have probably many of you would have been to Barcelona, and you'll see the cycle hire scheme they have there, which is in the top left-hand corner. And when this was launched, the study was done to really ask the question, is it actually doing any good? Are we putting people at risk by putting them out on the roads on bikes? So what they did was they weighed up the increased accident risk, and there is a slightly increased accident risk compared to taking a car. And they looked at the air pollution exposure that people were having, and also just that they were breathing a lot. And then they weighed this up against the benefits from the active travel and exercise. And their study found that the benefits outweighed the disbenefits by an astonishing ratio. It's 70 to 1. So it's 70 times better than it is bad, if that makes any sense. Some of these studies have been redone again. I think the consensus is somewhere about a 50 to 1 benefit today. We often talk about car transport, we talk about personal transport, we talk about public transport, so the movement of people, but we don't spend enough time talking about the movement of objects. You know, if you think about your office, the desk, the paper, everything in it is delivered by diesel lorry. The only things that probably reach your office not by diesel lorry are you when you're there, if you go by public transport, and the water out of the tap. Everything else arrives on a diesel vehicle. And these are really badly utilised. TfL did a study, which is getting a bit old now, from 2014 in London, and it found that 39% of vans were less than a quarter full. So many of them are going round quite empty. A quarter of a van is about 100 kilos, which coincidentally is about the sort of load of one of these cycle delivery vehicles. So there's huge potential to move much of what we're moving around by vans onto things like this. There's been a lot of talk about 15-minute neighbourhoods and some interesting counter narratives going on about these lately. The whole concept is just a really simple one. I look at it really that I think it'd be ever so nice if I could just walk back from the pub in the evening. So I can, or I can walk to the corner shop, or I can walk my child to school, and or having all of the things that I need in an everyday basis on my doorstep is really what this is about. Because it's no point us standing here saying you shouldn't drive your car when people are trapped into having to do journeys for certain things in everyday lives. Our cities, for those of you into urban planning, if you look at our cities up to about the 1930s, they were built in this way, and we didn't really zone them. So people worked and lived and went to the, you know, had corner shops and all things like that that were just densely in their neighborhoods. So doing this is actually quite straightforward. It's the way that most of our cities were built in the first place. We have a lot of talk about greenery. It was mentioned right heads up by Rachel about making London a greener place to visit. I think that's absolutely brilliant, but be very, very careful that we're not going to achieve very much through with air pollution and greenery. It's not going to be a solution. I put up a couple. Air pollution needs to be solved at source and not by trying to clean the air after it's become polluted. It's rather like trying to take the milk out of your cup of tea. It's in there very dilutely and it's very difficult to remove. I put some examples of some green screens that have been put up around places. This one near Oxford Street, which is going to do very little, have no impact on the air there. And this one's a school near Victoria, and you can see that the green screen's going to have little impact between the car and these open windows. And incidentally, if you go past it now, it died last year, so it's not there anymore. And this one is my favorite. This tower actually exists in China, and it's sold as sucking in or taking in all the air and cleaning that of a city, and you can see the pollution in the distance. And really, if it was doing so, let's face it, it's going to have to be sucking so much air, it will be dragging the cars off the street, won't it? People will be sucked off the street into it. It's not working. It's simple physics that you just can't clean that much air. So another thing about urban greening, I think it is actually a very valuable thing. You'll often hear quoted that patients, there's this off-quoted thing that patients that view greenery from their hospital windows recover faster from surgery and use fewer painkillers. I wrote about this in a Guardian piece, and I thought I've really got to get to the bottom of this. You know, is this myth or urban myth or fact? And yeah, does actually exist. There is a peer-reviewed journal article that looks at exactly this, and the findings are pretty much as summarized. So there's a lot of benefits of just purely greening the streets around us. WHO have set standards as to what green neighborhoods should look like. It recommends we have half a hectare of green public space, about 2/3 the size of a football pitch, within around 300 metres of our home. And the health benefits that result from this are listed here from one study. They think it could be prevented. If we were to do this, we could prevent around 43,000 early deaths across these 31 European countries that they look like. So there's huge benefits from greenery, but we mustn't kid ourselves that it's going to cure air pollution problems. One thing that does seem to be very effective for our air pollution problems is, of course, the ULEZ. This figure I'm seeing in the thread that maybe not everybody can see these, but this figure describes the air pollution, or the NO2, close to roads in the central area and in the inner area. And you can see each of them is two lines. The top line in each case is a counterfactual of what we estimate would have happened with no ULEZ, and the bottom one is what has actually been measured on the streets. And this is analysis by TfL that I reviewed. And you can see an obvious benefit, especially in the central area for the ULEZ. So just moving briefly, I've covered lots of things, so I'm going to start to bring this to a close. What other ideas do we have? Well, there's wonderful things about thinking about how we're going to repurpose our street space. Yeah, it's really quite precious. One of the most wonderful things are school streets. If you go and watch a school street, you know, kids normally pile out of school and are caged behind those fences that are put on the side of the road like animals in the zoo. And if we actually close off the roads, then families, I mean, look at this joyous scene here. Families, kids can play, people can talk to each other, and it turns the road outside a street, outside a school, from being a problem to an actual benefit for the school community. Turns it from being a problem into an asset. One of the other things as well, I think we need to start thinking about this, is should we start removing roads from the road network? There's been a lot about talking about pedestrianisation of Oxford Street, for instance. Some of these things are being done in the US. They're removing some of the freeways that were built as large concrete things that ploughed through really quite poor and, you know, BAME community neighbourhoods in the 1960s and 70s, and they're starting to remove them. There are two examples here, one in Seoul in North Korea, where this road that's on the left-hand side, and you can see in these photographs, sorry, in the top left here, if you can see my pointer, was removed, and the road had been installed along a river, and they kind of resurfaced the river to create, as you can see at the bottom piece, a green transport corridor and a place for people to actually rest, to work, to go and have their lunch. They have festivals there and so forth. Everybody predicted a complete disaster in the terms of the traffic, and it didn't arise. There was no indication of increased traffic in the city centre. There's been some similar stuff in Utrecht as well, where this top right picture went to the bottom right picture, where a canal that had been filled in was re-earthed. Finally, we talk so much about transport, but we're really not going to solve our air pollution problems in our cities just by looking at transport alone. We need to look at other things. The agriculture that's in the countryside around us, and things like the ways in which we heat our home. And if you heat yours with solid fuel, it's undoubtedly the most polluting thing that you will be doing at home. The personal care products that are changing so much that we use in our homes, and of course the issues of tyre and brake wear into transport. Finally, this whole series of talks is trying to think about joining together decarbonisation and air pollution. My late colleague Martin Williams sketched this originally on a napkin, literally at a dinner. And what it does is it has axes with air pollution benefit and climate change benefit. And what we need are the win-wins in the top right-hand corner. What we've often got from climate is the ones in the bottom right-hand corner, like biomass burning, urban CHP and dieselisation, that have been a disaster for air pollution. And I think there's good evidence they did very little for climate. Anyway, we need those ones in the top right-hand corner. But I think we need to go further. And I'm really bad at graphics, so you're just going to have to all imagine along with me now that there's a third axis here that's coming out of the page, which is one of health benefit. And if we also scored all the possible options on a health benefit, we would be able to triage them and prioritize them better. So one example, of course, is do we have electric vehicles or do we have active travel? And we've discussed some of the benefits of active travel over just the electrification of our vehicle fleets. We could think about, do we have heat pumps, or do we also invest in home insulation, alleviating fuel poverty and things like that as well? There are so many different wins that we could do to help our prioritisation. It's a bit of a confusing thing, and I'm not very good at graphics. My colleague Alice at University of Southampton, who works on the Clean Air programme alongside me, tried to capture it in a Venn diagram that you can have a look at, where you had the sweet spot in the middle of livable cities, active travel, home insulation, for instance. So finally, air pollution talks so often all doom and gloom, and I think we really need to spend some time in reimagining what our cities could look like if we could solve these problems. And they could be so much better, and so much of what you do in Cross River Partnerships associate with Urban Realm. And look at these images here. These are locations that actually do exist. And if you compare them to many of the streets that might be around you, certainly I would like to, well, I do live near some of these actually. But certainly, I want my city to have these in there. And if you just look at that little lad there on his space hopper and you don't see joy there, then there's something wrong, because he's grinning away. So finally, just drawing that together, I should have said a bit more about who I was, that I'm Gary Fuller, and I'm an air pollution scientist at Imperial College London. I'm also connected with something called the Clean Air Programme, where we have about 40 projects, from anything from innovation projects to research networks to traditional research projects that are looking at clean air, both indoors and outdoors. So there's the link there. I urge you to just go and have a look and see what's there. And if you want to contact the projects, then go for it. And finally, I have absolutely no shame. If anyone fancies a book on air pollution, then I can definitely recommend one. So thank you very much. I'm not sure what we're doing for questions. I think they're all happening at the end, aren't they, Rachel? I don't think Rachel's there, but I think it's not.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Gary. Yeah, any questions for Gary, please put these in the chat, and then we can do the Q&A session at the end. And I'll hand over to Eleanor.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks, Gary. So I'm Eleanor Marshall, and I'm the Transport Infrastructure Lead at Innovate UK KTN. So transport infrastructure for us covers all modes, and I sit within the transport team that has experts for the areas of rail, aviation, maritime, digital transport, zero-emission vehicles, and automation. So today I'm going to show you some innovative pilot projects that we're working on across transport infrastructure modes. All of these projects have been funded by the UK government, with Innovate UK KTN facilitating them. I'll be showing you individual projects from these funding rounds, but please feel free to research the cohort of projects afterwards. So this is just a high-level introduction to some of the innovative transport things that we have been up to over the past couple of years. So to introduce Innovate UK KTN, it exists to connect innovators with new partners and new opportunities beyond their existing thinking. So we help accelerate ambitious ideas into real-world solutions. So we connect all sectors together, from SMEs, large organisations, from the public to private sector. And as you can see here, we cover a lot of sectors. So we have cross-sector expertise from a diverse strata of industries. And as you can see, we are pretty much spread about all over the UK. and we also have offices in Africa as well. So on to the first project. We have recently launched a hydrogen supply chain directory. So this directory shares the details of collaborative organisations that are currently using or producing hydrogen or are proactively planning to. So it showcases these solution providers in the supply chain who can help people meet their hydrogen needs for hydrogen innovation in the UK, which is a major UK government target. So I think a link's been put to the directory in the chat, and if you'd like to be personally introduced to anyone in the directory, then please follow the links on the website. So we've broken the hydrogen supply chain down into 6 elements: production, conversion, storage, distribution, utilisation and support services. And the UK, as you can see, has strong representation from all 4 nations in the hydrogen production sphere. So next we have our V2X programme, Vehicle to Everything. So as part of the transition to net zero, the government has committed to phasing out the sale of new petrol and diesel cars in 2030. So Vehicle to Everything Innovation Programme aims to address barriers by enabling energy flexibility from bidirectional electric vehicle charging. So it's pretty new technology. So we are delivering the V2X Innovation Programme alongside the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, which was formerly the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. So this is part of the 1 billion net zero innovation portfolio for the UK government. So in phase 1 of this programme, 17 R&D projects were awarded 3.2 million, and we are awarding 9.4 million for phase 2, which is currently an open competition. This is particularly interesting in terms of thinking about the built environment, because V2X covers not just curbside charging, which is sort of what the technology was previously. X stands for everything. So it's looking at not just the grid, but also buildings of various different typologies. So it's really about EV charging sort of going further into the built environment as a system. So next we're on to maritime. So this is a quite fun project, which was part of the Clean Maritime Demonstration Competition run by the Department of Transport. And this is a £2.8 million project to develop offshore charging, which can be deployed at the base of wind turbines and charge vessels when they're in the sea. I was going to show you the video, but I'm not too sure technically if it will work, so I might just move on. However, I will share the link to the video if you want to see an animation of how it would work. So next I'm going to go on to aviation. So the Sustainable Aviation Test Environment, or SATE, is part of the Future Flight Challenge, which was funded by UKRI. And this particular project brings together a consortium of partners, including the Highlands and Islands Airports, Loganair, Zero Avia, the Connected Places Catapult, and the Highlands and Islands Transport Partnership. So this project is based in the Orkney Islands, and it's the first low-carbon aviation test centre in an active commercial airport. So it builds on its recent success by demonstrating the first hybrid electric flights in the UK and the use of electric autonomous drones for meal delivery within the Orkney Islands. So you can see in the picture, that is the application. So this project's expanding to create a UK Centre of Excellence for Sustainable Regional Aviation Systems. So demonstrating hydrogen-powered as well as electric-powered flights. And the sort of future for this project is they're going to be trialling NHS deliveries to remote communities, such as islands across Scotland. So next, we have rail. So this project undertook the first mainline operational testing of a train equipped with a hydrogen fuel cell. So the testing programme gathered evidence to inform the ongoing development of hydrogen fuel cells and battery technologies, and it was deployed on a verified electric train. So the reason why we would use this technology is because it can be deployed where electrification is expensive or not possible. So this was developed in partnership with the government and the University of Birmingham and Porterbrook, and it was demonstrated in 2019. So for the future of this, still needs to go through testing, and we need to sort of run approvals before it goes on the main line. And so it could happen quite quickly, the adoption of this technology, once they get the go-ahead to go on our railways. So last but not least, buses. So this project, called CAV 402, is funded by the UK government and the Centre for Connected and Autonomous Vehicles. And their project partners are Stagecoach, Alexander Dennis, Edinburgh Napier University, and the University of the West of England. So this project will see Stagecoach, which is the UK's largest bus operator, run an autonomous bus service from Edinburgh across the Forth Road Bridge to Dunfermline. So currently it's in its testing phase, but we could see these autonomous buses on our roads potentially by this year if they pass all the testing. And it's not completely unmanned. So the idea is that you will have a person on board which will sort of oversee the bus. So it won't be totally driverless. And this is very important as people get used to autonomous technologies. So to summarise, innovative decarbonisation transport pilots like these are they have a big impact on emissions. However, they should go alongside other measures such as active travel, climate resilient public realm, schemes such as 15-minute cities and LTNs, as Gary already touched on, because decarbonising the built environment is a holistic thing. You shouldn't just rely too much on new technologies, but they do help massively to get rid of fossil fuels in our built environment. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Anna. And yeah, as with Gary, if you have any questions, really keen to pick up the discussion again after Dan's presentation for the Q&A, but I'll hand over to you, Dan.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to speak at the event today. So I'm the business development lead for a freight commodity we're calling Express Freight, and I work in the Great British Railways transition team within the Strategic Freight Unit. And I work very closely with colleagues across Network Rail on this commodity as well. So I'm pleased to be talking about the latest piece of sustainable freight research that CRP commissioned Steer Transport Consultants to undertake. We've been working closely with me here in the freight team for GBRTT. And the research is joint funded by Guy's and St Thomas's Health Foundation, Impact on Urban Health, and DEFRA. So the latest piece of research called On Track for Sustainable Logistics and Integrating Rail Freight into London's Deliveries, bit of a mouthful there, but it's looked into the capacity of various London stations for handling increased rail freight into London, with a view to removing polluting lorries from the roads. So the onward journeys away from the rail terminus across central London would be undertaken by zero emission modes such as the e-cargo bikes and e-vans and walking freight and those kind of things. So over the last few years, we've seen a dramatic increase in e-commerce and the number of deliveries to home. So as an example, between 2019 and 2020, we saw an increase in the volumes of about 30% in deliveries. So the pandemic was accelerating an existing trend in online retail with a corresponding growth in deliveries. So the volumes haven't really been dropping post-pandemic. And the growth was predominantly by road. So rail didn't really see the increase in that volume of deliveries. But we feel there's a strong case with the right infrastructure in place that rail could play a much bigger part in the supply chain for the e-commerce and other markets, such as the urban supermarket replenishment and that kind of market. So I want to set in context and describe a little bit about what we mean when we say the term express freight. So it's a new kind of commodity for rail, which we're looking at providing support for. So if we look at the left-hand column here, the parcels as passengers concept. So it's about using regular in-service passenger trains to move goods between stations. So courier presents with a series of goods at one end, and another courier comes and collects at the other end. So the really good thing about this kind of model is that it's not taking anything extra away from the capacity in the system. It's just using the trains that are already there and already running in a much more efficient way. The next column along, this is the idea of dedicated freight multiple units and running those into stations. So it's about using former passenger units, which have been converted to carry light freight, and using stations as the transfer point from rail to road. So it's looking to address one of the key challenges that there is in this market, where distribution centres aren't necessarily next to railheads, so they're not rail connected necessarily. So it's about bringing the distribution centres and the delivery stations closer to rail and removing one of the HGV legs in the process. And the final column is about trunk logistics moves. So it's similar to the middle model, but it's about the middle mile. So moving from distribution centres to delivery stations. And so this would definitely benefit from having a greater number of rail connected warehouses. And GBRTT and Network Rail are working with developers to see if we can extend that network of rail connected warehousing. So we knew it'd be important to engage with the road market, with the courier and the logistics industry as part of pulling this report together. So it's been about talking to businesses and retailers who'd be interested in moving their goods by rail, as well as train operators, freight operating companies, to understand this market as best as we could. So these are the logos of the companies that have been involved in the research phase of this report. But within Network Rail and GBRTT, we've been looking at major stations to understand where we could potentially integrate freight for distribution in urban centres. So as an example, we've looked at Euston Parcel Deck. So this was a purpose-built parcel handling area above the concourse and above the station, and it hasn't been used for that kind of logistics and goods for quite a long time. So it's been utilised for other things in the intervening period. So part of it's being used as part of high-speed 2 development. Network Rail maintenance team are now in that area, and other functions have been located. So it doesn't really have the space that it once did for this kind of market. So the research has identified that the best potential railway station for increased rail freight in the Lambeth and Southwark areas is Waterloo Station. So it's got a lot of merits in its favour. Notably, there's a large undercroft space which sits underneath the main station, and it's currently underutilised. So this space opens up the opportunity to bring large volumes of goods into the station by rail. And we know there's interest in bringing goods into central London, where the population density and the delivery volumes are right to make the commercial case more attractive. So it would be using predominantly existing technologies, which are low and zero emission technologies. And Waterloo could potentially open up the water freight interchange possibilities because of its proximity to the river. So we can see in a couple of the pictures here, there's an existing ramp which is used for station servicing, which leads from platform 11 and 12 into the Undercroft area, and there's a significant amount of space under there which is accessible from Waterloo Road. So here, this is just a simple diagram showing the kind of operating model that's been identified, and so you can see here arrival by train, and then into a Waterloo station, and then out by a zero emission mode. And this is just to demonstrate the kind of time that it would take to get into the station. So the top table is showing if you've got the parcels as passengers model, how long would it take to get from various cities where passenger services are already running. But I think the real opportunity that it shows here is the kinds of numbers of people and businesses that having a freight hub at Waterloo would open up. So there'd be access to about 3.5 million people and about 200,000 businesses in inner London. And one of the really valuable things of Waterloo Station is that you'd create the possibility to link central London to distribution hotspots like the Midlands and further north. So it's a new way of reimagining the role of our stations and what part they can play in the logistics supply chain in urban environments. And there are other stations which could have this kind of impact in other parts of the country as well that we're looking into. So it would be, in a sense, bringing back some of the historic uses for stations, but it really does open up that corridor from the Midlands to central London. We're very aware that London Borough Lambeth and Network Rail already have an in-depth Waterloo Station master planning exercise which is underway, and we've fed into some of those meetings more recently with officers to encourage freight as well as passenger considerations to be addressed by the master plan. So we plan to strengthen that relationship with the team going forwards and feeding our learning into the master plan work that's already happening there. So we're really pleased actually that the increased rail freight into Waterloo Station and the zero emission onwards deliveries would make a fantastic contribution to 3 of the 5 themes of the Waterloo and South Bank Future Neighbourhoods 2030 strategy. So we think it's got really good alignment with a lot of the strategies that are impacting in that same area. And we've started to look at the space requirements for the different express freight modes. So how would individual spaces within the Undercroft area be best utilised? And the amount of space that's under there, it would open up the possibilities of some on-site sortation, which would alleviate some of the issues for courier companies in terms of double handling and in terms of what kind of facilities they would need at the origin point of the journey. And it would also provide space for loaded cages if there's a large volume delivered at once, and it would also accept empties ready for their journey back to the origin point. So we think some of the important next steps in the proposal is to develop some more detailed options for the space and feeding those ideas to the master plan development. And we think it's a really exciting space which could go a long way to bring in a large-scale delivery volumes by rail to complement the existing passenger uses for the station. And finally, just an indication. So CRP's been working on sustainable freight for over a decade. So stretching back to last mile logistics work with intermodality, funded by Interreg European funding. So they're a good fit to keep working with us in the rail industry to keep developing those options to see where we can take this. And thank you very much for your time.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dan, and thank you, everyone. And we're going to go to questions now. We've had quite a few through in the chat, so I'm just going to stop sharing, and then everyone keep their cameras on. I'll start with Gary. It was a question from Eventbrite, and it's also come up in the chat too. So about Hammersmith Bridge's restoration. I know you put a link in response anyway, but does it strike a balance between innovative transport, decarbonisation, air quality management, and what are your thoughts on the restoration and air quality?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it's an interesting question, and I think overall we should be looking for opportunities not to expand our existing road network, but to think about repurposing it. And what's proposed there for Hammersmith Bridge, certainly from what I've seen in this sort of temporary phase, is this two-deck structure whereby there's vehicles on the top and passengers below. I don't know. I find myself a little bit worried on two fronts. One, certainly about the noise for people travelling underneath the road when they're walking across, but also the air pollution exposure, since they would be the exhaust from the vehicles would be just potentially funneled into that space where the people are walking underneath. Someone needs to do some computational fluid dynamics. But there's a bigger question here about what the long-term future for Hammersmith Bridge should be. And I understand that people on the south side around Castle know if you ever cycle across there, or when you could, you go from this transport, just real threatening environment that is the area around Hammersmith. You enter the bridge when it was closed to other traffic and just open for cycling, and it's like a breath of fresh air. But still, there is important connectivity required for that community that sits there just to the south. So I think there's a lot of things to be put into this, but I think it's an ideal opportunity not to have Hammersmith Bridge restored to the Hammersmith Bridge that it was before. We could do something a lot better.
Okay, brilliant. And then Eleanor, on green jobs about autonomous transport. I don't know if you had anything on that, and also active travel in that space as well.
So active travel plays a massive part in the decarbonisation of the UK. However, I suppose from an Innovate UK perspective, it's mostly focused on science and technology competitions. However, the Department for Transport has just set up Active Travel England. So yeah, they're very much taking it seriously by setting up new departments in this area. In terms of will EV charging cover e-cargo bikes? In practice, yes, on the street it will. But as I said before, mostly this sort of Innovate UK's work is focused on sort of big science and tech developments. Where are the green jobs going to go if we're going to have autonomous transport? Well, I think that's not just a question for the UK or Europe. I think it's a question for the world as the technology develops. I mean, we already have autonomous vehicles delivering packages in some cities in England. So, yeah, I mean, it's sort of a matter of time. But then, as we've seen before, when jobs disappear, other jobs, new types of jobs are created. But yeah, and I mean, I can't drive myself, so I believe that active travel is massively important.
And just in terms of the innovations you mentioned, are there case studies on them, and can we go to the website?
Yes, so with all central government funded competitions, there will be studies and results published. It might take a while after the competition has finished and the pilot's finished, but they are put on the .gov.uk website under the relevant central government department. So Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, as it is now, or Department for Transport, etc. And also we do facilitate showcase events as well for these funded trials and pilots. So we recently had one in Sheffield, and that was showcasing EV charging from government competitions over the last couple of years. So yeah, do look out for those kind of things on the website.
Brilliant. And Dan Elliott asked a question about barges on canals, bringing parcels into central London, Paddington, King's Cross. Yeah, it'd be good to get your views on how that could be incorporated with rail freight, as the study mentions.
Yes, I think that's what we need to be looking at the next phase, really, especially, you know, Waterloo Station, it's close to the river, it's got the potential to integrate there. So I think it's an opportunity. How well it can integrate if you're adding an extra leg of handling, we'll have to see, and I think but it certainly warrants further investigation.
There's quite a long, perfect, thank you. Sorry, I'm just looking at questions. There's quite a long one for Eleanor. We did have one in the Eventbrite as well about opportunities for green tech companies looking to reduce air pollution in the capital. I don't know if there's anything that you mentioned in your presentation or kind of, yeah, support for businesses and maybe where to apply, or I guess people can look at your case studies, but if you had anything further.
Yeah, I mean, especially for software, it's playing a bigger and bigger part in this infrastructure. For example, V2X. So yeah, I mean, KTN can help you sort of navigate the government competitions that are open. And I've just had a look at the long question. So I mean, but at Innovate UK, there is a focus on sort of technical and science projects. However, other government departments like the DFT and DEFRA, for example, do offer funding for decarbonisation in areas such as e-bikes and cargo bikes, and also at a sort of sub-regional and local authority level as well. And in terms of focus on hydrogen electrification, the government is currently taking a sort of twin track approach by not particularly choosing one technology over the other, because the prediction is that it's going to be a mixture of both hydrogen for bigger things, electrification for smaller things. So that's the sort of reasoning behind the funding.
Okay, brilliant. Gary, in terms of viewing e-vehicles as zero emission, I know you posted a link, but I wonder if you could expand on that about whether they're zero emission or how we should be labeling them.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think this also applies to our future hydrogen technologies as well. We now find that for the diesel vehicles that are out there on our roads, the majority of particle pollution that's coming from them is not now coming from the exhaust pipe because of the abatement technologies that have been applied. It's coming from the wear of tires, brakes, and roads. And there's good evidence from my sort of toxicology colleagues that these types of particles could be quite harmful to us from some of the transition metals and other chemicals that they contain. So I think, and I put in a couple of notes there, we had a good discussion of this on, I sit on DEFRA's air quality expert group, about some of the framing of electric vehicles. It's not to say that electric vehicles shouldn't be part of the solution. But we just have to make sure that we fully understand that they're not going to cure all the particle pollution problems in our cities, and also that we invest in technology to make them better. So there's a lot of, this is looking at current electric vehicles. There's huge developments within the electric vehicle manufacturers to make them lighter, so and have less tire wear, because both of those mean longer range. So there is a lot of innovation there, and we just need to not overlook this problem and make sure that we're driving innovation to minimize this sector, rather than this type of emission, rather than walking into it blindly. There's another one with hydrogen, and there's quite a few of us in the air pollution community are very concerned by this. And Eleanor, you talked about a technology neutral stance, and I think this is really dangerous for air pollution. Whenever we burn anything, if we're burning it efficiently, we create NOx and nitrogen dioxide. So there's a lot of things around hydrogen that, because we all learned when we did GCSE at chemistry at school, I'm sure you'll all remember that you have hydrogen in a test tube, you throw in your lighted taper and explodes with a squeaky pop, and the teacher tells you all you have is water vapor. And this is very much around a lot of technologists still actually do this, but anytime you burn something efficiently, you get NOx because of the nitrogen in the combustion air, not because of that in the fuel. So where we actually decide to burn hydrogen and where we decide to use fuel cells, it's utterly critical. If we continue to have combustion of hydrogen close to people, then we will continue to have exposure to nitrogen dioxide. And it's a bit difficult cleaning up some of these new sources. So we really have to get away from a technology neutral approach to think about, if we are going to use hydrogen, we have to be using it in certain ways where there's exposure to people, and maybe we can have combustion in different ways, maybe in large sort of power station combustion plants where it is possible to fit abatement. So we really need to think about this carefully. Otherwise, we're just going to walk into either prolonging our current nitrogen dioxide problems, or in many cases, we could actually make them worse.
I think that's one for your MP. No comment.
No, but no, it is for you. It's for you. You're leading technology. Your program is, and this technology neutral bit is providing a peril. So me, I don't know if it's one for your MP. It's one for all of you to, I suppose, to spread that awareness and to look up the issue. And when people are looking for hydrogen technology solutions, we have to think about what the NOx abatement on them is if they're burning things, or the way in which the hydrogen is used, be it fuel cells or combustion. So it's up to all of us in the types of projects that we take forward to make sure that we're embedding this knowledge.
We've had a
the
question on
decisions that we're making. Sorry.
HVO as well being used in our existing vehicles as an alternative. Not sure if anyone has any comment on that. Okay.
Would someone like to say, would the questioner like to say what HVO is?
We just need airships.
No, we need transportation. We need to get people around and things like that. It's not
hydrotreated vegetable oil, so it's
right.
like biomass.
Yeah, I mean, it is part of the alternative fuel landscape.
Dan,
there are examples of it being tested within rail freight to understand what it could do to with some of the sort of the older diesel locos and whether it has a part to play in that world. I just wanted to, if I could just fly the flag and answer a question that hasn't quite been asked, but I just want to say it's important to recognise that the role that rail freight has across London in limiting emissions in other commodities. So we can see, as an example, there's over 40% of construction traffic, such as concrete, aggregates and cement, delivered to the capital by rail. So it's kind of under the radar, and it's 1,500 to 1,800 tons per train, which is coming in, and it's keeping roads clearer and keeping sort of air pollution down. So it's getting the product to within miles of or the last couple of miles of where it needs to be. So whilst I think it's important to talk about the opportunities within the kind of the parcel and the express freight market, I just wanted to say that it's also important that we don't get in the way of developments that get the really heavy tonnage trains into the heart of our cities.
Thank you very much indeed. And yeah, if you're interested in the rail freight study, we've published that and we'll send that out with all the information from the session. I just wanted to point you quickly to our next session, which takes place at the end of April. So we'll focus on prioritising sustainable logistics. We've got speakers including Ben Knowles, former formerly the CEO and founder of PedalMe, but now running Future Vehicles company and he'll be discussing how to scale up the cargo bike sector. So Catherine's put a link if you'd like to join. But yeah, thank you so much to our 3 speakers, and we'll hopefully see you all soon. And definitely follow up with the questions we haven't got round to in the chat. So thanks so much for the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Helena. Thanks, Dan.
Do you want us to hang on to talk at the end, Rachel?
I think we're all good, Gary.
No, that's fine. I just wondered if you wanted to debrief on any of the reactions or discussion.